That's not fair. Oh. Ah, that'll do it.
Hello, Stephanie Sterling here, still PCW Women's Champion since March, because I am a winner of a wrestler. Thank you very much. And speaking of winners, before we kick off with today's video, I did just want to congratulate Nick and Yahtzee and the whole team at Second Wind, an outfit that formed when the entire video team quit from my old haunt, The Escapist. Just wonderful to see a middle finger go up to the corpo wankers who bought up all the good game sites and pushed out all the independent voices. It's just been great to see, and very heartwarming that a lot of the viewers and audience for Second Wind remember who I am. That was nice. Speaking of old clapped out crap that never really made it, I have new stuff. Supernaturals is the little bit of show and tell for today, aka when your mum says we've got perfectly good visionaries at home.
Put evil skull in the creepy coffin, turn the key, the ghost world's got him.
They were basically like I don't even know if that's showing up on the camera, sort of holography things inside things. But anyway, like you can make them nude like this, like that, and then they've got holographs going on like that, and you can even, because they've got such rigid legs with such pronounced little bums, you can make them bum each other, just pounding it like that, and pounding it, and pound it with, I'm basically just doing this to sell a new shirt we've got on the Jimporium.com. Anyway, his fucking arm came off. I legit broke that. That was my favourite one. We've had some really shitty games this year, and the past few episodes of this show actually have been focusing quite heavily on certain awful games. We had Stray Souls, we had Silent Hill Ascension, and today's video has a slightly broader message, but it does put the spotlight on Kong. 2023 has been a triumph for disaster when it... Strange. 2020... what am I, a fucking rescue ranger? 2023 has been a triumph for disaster when it comes to video games. The sheer amount of high-profile failures and abject laughingstocks might have reached record levels this year, as have the apologies that are becoming practically routine now for the amount of underfunded, underpolished, bloody unfinished software squirting onto the market like so much liquid shit. The Solemn JPEG has gone from occasional hallmark of a notably egregious fuck-up to an obligatory part of the game industry PR machine. Just look at the sheer volume of branded image files bearing hollow apologies that are really hard to take sincerely, since they knew how fucking terrible their game was when they had the sheer temerity to sell it to a misled audience. The very fact these little JPEGs have become so routine only demonstrates the performative nature of them. Redfall, Gollum, Stray Souls, somehow not Starfield, but it should have been. The list of games so fucked up they came with promises of patches and pledges to be better on a little image file on social media has only grown and grown, and that doesn't count the disastrous PC ports that have become their own special subgenre of literally sorry pieces of shit. And, of course, there are games of a more shameless nature that should be apologised for, but bloody haven't been. Look, this year has seen some incredible games too. Baldur's Gate 3, Bone Razor Minions, you know. But many people have pointed out what a staggering river of cum 2023 has been. Which brings me to a video game I'd really like to put a spotlight on, Skull Island: Rise of Kong. A game I've recently been told a lot of game reviewers thought was too low-hanging fruit to touch, which... Sorry, when did we game reviewers suddenly get fucking standards? And if we have them, why are we still reviewing Ubisoft games? A game so bad that many have registered their surprise Gollum got such a stiff contender for the crown of Worst Game of the Year.
It was ours, oh, precious.
Indeed, I reviewed it on the Jimquisition.com just a few days ago and decided to give it the exact same score because it truly is exactly as bad. In many of the same ways too. Blatantly unfinished and despicably rushed to market, Skull Island is a minimum viable product that only barely attains the qualification of viable, and sometimes fails even that. Perhaps no greater indictment of this shit piece is the fact that it shipped with a cutscene that had placeholder assets, literally using a static JPEG of a dinosaur in one shot. I'm trying to think of a published game at this level that's had such a humiliating self-report, and like a game that ran out of funding and didn't have enough resources for a dinosaur animation. I got nothing. The sheer lack of completion on display is baked into this game, which is about the only baking that's been done. Environments are barren, haphazard wastelands dotted carelessly with enemies that have only the most rudimentary AI and struggle to visibly connect with King Kong in any way. Walking animations are out of sync with how fast everything moves, so everything moves as if it's slightly sliding along the ground that boasts a limited corporeality since character models sink into the surface of practically everything. Be it combat, supposedly solid surfaces, climbing mechanics, nothing gels correctly. Everything seemingly inhabits its own unstable plane of reality that's vaguely intersected with everything else. Kong can pick up small enemies, and he doesn't even hold them in his hand. They're just sort of glued near his wrist. Fighting doesn't have enough visual or audio assets to make it feel like attacks are connecting or come with any impact. Some attacks, like the jump attack, don't even fully work. The execution finishes are a joke of a particularly pathetic nature, as Kong and the thing he's killing misalign frequently, disappear into the floor, and otherwise glitch out. Pterodactyls instantly blip into a static version of their idol poses when they die, before unceremoniously blinking out of existence. Kong gets stuck, totally frozen, on seemingly invisible snags, from which the only freedom is gained from reloading a previous save. There's a roar command that allegedly flags points of interest on screen, and yet if you go to these flagged points, you find nothing there. The maps don't show you where you are or where anything is. They're big winding spaghetti puddles that seem designed to trick you into circling or backtracking. And of course the level design itself is so fucking barren that there are no real landmarks to speak of. Shadows in caves are just flat black textures that disappear to show brightness if you go inside by walking through them. Speaking of textures, a visually disgusting method of avoiding pop-in has been used. Textures don't pop in. Oh no. They ooze in. They pour themselves over everything like thick, spoiled milk, making the world appear melty and distinctly alien. None of this accounts for how incompetent it is from a design aspect mind, the most egregious example of which is the fact that in a world where everything is sized relative to a normal gorilla or bigger, and the camera is pulled back so far he barely occupies the screen, King Kong, the movie icon literally known for being a giant fucking ape, feels small. Small and undaunting. Dinky. A dinky little monkey boy. Amazing. Rise of Kong feels less well put together than many bottom shelf budget games. There are asset flips that play better than this bullshit. And the worst part is, not only did those involved know they were selling a goddamn lemon, it's part of the goddamn business model. Game Mill Entertainment might be the most on-the-nose name a video game publisher's ever had. Its entire MO is acquiring licenses to intellectual property and then churning out a game as quickly and cheaply as possible to turn a quick buck. It's a literal game mill. The main reason Skull Island is such an appalling shit show is that it was made in a year. That's how long the studio had to cobble it together, and that was a strict deadline. The development process of this game was started in June of last year, and it was aimed to end on June 2nd this year. So 1 year development process, said an anonymous member of developer Iguanabee speaking with Verge. The Verge article states that ultimately, Rise of Kong is the best game it could have been under those circumstances. The resources were so low and the schedule so unreasonably tight that those damned souls charged with its development could only work as hard as possible for as long as they had and just ship whatever the result was, because Game Mill was going to give them not 1 second nor penny more than it had initially deemed sufficient. Apparently this ain't unusual for Game Mill. Like I said, this is a business model. So great is the company's audacity, it even has developers start working on games before they even know what those games are going to be about. They just start making a basic video game, so they've got a head start when an IP is plugged into it whenever Game Mill has a new license to flog. That is so fucking hack grade and yet sort of fucking clever. Clever in a really shitty way, but goddamn. It was very common for us not to be provided with all the information about the project, reads another Verge quote, which was quite frustrating when working because we had to improvise with the limited information we had on hand. There wasn't even enough money going around to retain experienced staff. Talent couldn't remain at Iguanabee for particularly long periods of time because, well, the company hadn't been given the funding to keep them. Fuck's sake. Naturally, such clueless direction and harsh deadlines meant crunch reared its ugly head. You know, that abusive failure of industry leadership that has only ever resulted in lower quality work because the executive dipshits ruining the show are too fucking thick or callous to figure that working your talent to stressed out exhaustion doesn't increase productivity, because why fucking would it? Of course, Game Mill specifically doesn't care about quality of work because Game Mill is literally a game mill. The crunch was really set in motion in February. I was on automatic pilot by the end of February because all hope was lost. In my review of Skull Island, I wrote the following as I had something of a realization. Ultimately, Skull Island is a scam. It's not even bad in a funny way, it's just insulting. It's not been finished. It was roughly stitched into the vague shape of a video game and given the price tag of a legitimate product. It's the kind of game that makes the case for some sort of independent trading standards body in the game industry. I say this with all due gravity. The Game Mill should not have been allowed to sell Skull Island Rise of Kong. In an industry with adequate customer protections, it should be recalled. We've gotten so used to shockingly bad games that we've just accepted they exist, and the only recriminations are low review scores and, if we can be bothered to jump through the requisite hoops and only if we adhere to strict limitations, maybe a refund. But this is a defective product, a blatantly broken item they sold knowing that it was poorly taped together to an unacceptable standard and liable to fall apart at any minute. We have had a year of defective products. Same goes for that Gollum game. That should not have been sold. It's inexcusable. It is not fit for fucking purpose. If this was a fucking vacuum cleaner, it would be recalled. You can't sell a vacuum cleaner that periodically fails to stop sucking anything up, has loose head attachments that fall off, and slowly leaks a thin trickle of smegma through the filter. Or perhaps more comparably, a movie Blu-ray that kept freezing or stuttering would be considered unfit for sale. A book held together by a rusty paperclip would be considered unfit for sale. But you can sell games so busted they're literally unplayable and get to just keep fucking selling it. Only if enough controversy is kicked up, like with Cyberpunk 2077, does a store consider pulling it. And hell, even at its worst, Cyberpunk was nowhere near as bad as some of the rank fucking garbage that came out this year. Maybe there should be an independent body, a truly independent one, not something started by the fucking ESA to avoid regulations and cover game companies' tracks. Nothing shits up corpo wankers like regulation, and with good reason. These companies don't stop doing any of the horrid shit they do until they're bloody forced to. It's about time games faced some sort of Trades Descriptions Act or something. A company like Game Mill Entertainment shouldn't even be allowed to operate. Oh, and if you're asking me, it's neither Rise of Kong nor Gollum that's probably the absolute shittiest game of the year. For me, it's a toss-up between Silent Hill Ascension and Stray Souls. And the fact that we have so much stiff fucking competition is just... Well, I've never been this spoiled for choice when compiling my shittiest game of the year list for December. Fucking hell. Starfield's on it.
This thing right here is here to let all you gamers know what it is that James Stephanie Sterling is talking about. You know, the crappy things in life. Check it out. Game building is so obvious. It's a turd that you fellas can't polish, yes, but you're still trying to sell it like what's the ish? Get a bucket in a mop because you're taking the piss. It really seems like it's incomplete. Always clipping with the ground and the model's meat. And you got King Kong looking so petite, like he's Curious George on protein. Dang, things janky as fuck. Combat is bugged. Gameplay is but it's so incredibly lame. Textures look like they're mush. Obviously rushed. The whole thing's wrong. Game will ruin that. Check out the shitty JPEG. Should have been a temporary. Yeah, you gotta know. You ruined Kong. It's almost like a Stray Souls. Went through 7 dozen a-holes. Oh, game, but I think you know that you ruined Kong.
Manzilla there, once again, upstaging me with a great music video. You bastard! Z-Manzilla is the best decision I ever made to bring them on as a co-editor, just brilliant. Anyway, that was a video primarily focusing on Kong, which, as I mentioned, some critics have decided is low-hanging fruit, like they're too good to touch it, which, again, still puzzles me. We're game reviewers, folks. We have no dignity already. If we're at a school reunion, we lie, tell them we, you know, eat literal human shit for a living. That'd have a bit more gravitas, a bit more class. But I think there is a very important point to be made. We can pretend these games don't exist, we can ignore them, we can act like we're above touching them, or we can talk about how it really is unacceptable for a publisher like GameHill to churn out that kind of shit. I mean, this all started with what I called patch culture, like well over 10 years ago, where developers realised that they could just shit out games in a half-finished, well, I say developers, a lot of it at the behest of publishers, realised they could just shit out unfinished games and patch them later to fix them. That, of course, led to the concept of the live service, where the games weren't even half made, and they promised in their little roadmaps of content that they'd finish the game, except barely any of them actually got finished, because the games were in such a clapped out condition that they then had to spend all of that dev time post-launch fixing it. And now we have a year like this where the torrent of bad, low quality, unfinished, broken games is just staggering, and I think it should be called out every single time. Thank God for me.